When I slid that manila folder across the dinner table, my brother-in-law's face went from aggressive to ghost white in about 2 seconds. His hand was still raised mid-gesture, finger pointed at my chest like he was making some final demand. But the moment I said, "Before you finish that sentence, Brett, you should probably see what's inside," everything stopped. Welcome to Cheating Story Exposed. Real stories, real justice, no sugarcoating, you know what. I notice many of you watching haven't hit that subscribe button yet. Here's the thing, we drop stories like this every single day. Stories about people who got played, got smart, and got even. If you want to see how these situations really end, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. My name is Owen Castellano. I'm 37 years old, and I'm an audit manager for a mid-sized accounting firm in Portland. I've built my entire career on finding discrepancies that other people miss, following paper trails, connecting dots, verifying what people claim is true. Never thought I'd have to use those same skills on my own wife's family. 3 months ago, my life looked pretty standard from the outside. I'd been married to Natalie for 6 years. We had a good relationship, not perfect, nobody's is, but solid. We both worked, split responsibilities, talked through problems. She was a speech therapist at an elementary school. We'd bought a house 2 years prior in a decent neighborhood. Normal life, normal marriage, normal problems like whose turn it was to deal with the gutters or whether we were saving enough for retirement. Natalie's family, though, that was always a different story. Her parents, Richard and Diane Morrison, lived about 40 minutes away in the suburbs. Retired early, or so they always said. Richard had worked in sales management. Diane had been a real estate agent. According to family lore, they'd done well for themselves, invested smartly, and now spent their golden years traveling and enjoying life. Then there were Natalie's siblings. Brett, her older brother, 39, who bounced between business opportunities and never seemed to hold the same job for more than 18 months. And Chelsea, her younger sister, 32, who worked part-time as a yoga instructor while her husband Marcus supposedly ran some kind of consulting business from home. From day one, something felt off about how that family handled money. Conversations at family dinners always circled back to investments, opportunities, who was buying what. Richard loved to talk about his portfolio and would drop hints about properties he was looking at or stocks he was watching. Brett constantly pitched business ideas, apps, franchises, cryptocurrency schemes. Chelsea and Marcus were always mentioning their expansion plans for the yoga studio or Marcus's consulting clients, though I never actually met any of these clients. What bothered me most was how they treated Natalie. She was the youngest of the 3 siblings and clearly the most stable, steady job, responsible with money, never asked her parents for anything. But in family dynamics, she was somehow always positioned as the one who hadn't quite figured things out yet. Brett would make comments about real business versus just having a job. Chelsea would suggest Natalie was playing it too safe by not investing in Marcus's ventures. Richard and Diane, meanwhile, seemed to enable all of it, nodding along to Brett's schemes and praising Chelsea's entrepreneurial spirit. I kept my distance, attended the family functions, stayed polite, didn't engage when Brett started pitching his latest idea or when Marcus began explaining why his consulting rates were industry-leading. Natalie would sometimes get frustrated after these gatherings, venting about how her family made her feel like she wasn't ambitious enough. I'd remind her that having a stable career and actually paying your bills was plenty ambitious. Then about 4 months ago, things shifted. It started with phone calls. Natalie's phone would ring during dinner, and it would be Brett or Chelsea or sometimes her mother, and the conversations were always hushed and brief. When I'd ask what it was about, Natalie would wave it off, just family stuff, or they're dealing with some things. She'd seem stressed afterward but wouldn't elaborate. The calls increased in frequency. 2-3 times a week, then daily. Natalie started stepping out of the room to take them, which wasn't like her. We'd always been pretty open about phone conversations, neither of us the type to be secretive. But suddenly she was walking into the bedroom and closing the door, keeping her voice low. I didn't immediately jump to suspicion. My mind didn't go to affairs or anything like that. Natalie and I had a strong relationship, and I trusted her, but I was concerned. Something was clearly bothering her, and she wasn't talking to me about it. "Nat," I said one evening after another hushed phone call with Chelsea, "what's going on with your family? You've been on the phone with them constantly, and you seem stressed every time." She sat on the edge of the bed, phone still in her hand, and for a moment I thought she might actually tell me, but then she just shook her head. It's complicated. My parents are going through some financial stuff. Brett and Chelsea are trying to help them figure it out. I don't want to burden you with it. Burden me? We're married. If your parents are having problems, that affects both of us. It's not that serious. They just need to reorganize some things. It'll be fine. But it clearly wasn't fine. Over the next 2 weeks, Natalie became increasingly distant. She'd be on her laptop late at night, scrolling through what looked like spreadsheets or documents. When I'd glance over, she'd minimize the windows. She started making comments about how we should be more generous with family, how blood comes first. Things she'd never really said before. Then came the first money request. We were having breakfast on a Saturday when Natalie said, almost casually, "My dad needs to borrow $10,000, just short-term, like 2 months. He's waiting for an investment to mature, but he needs to cover some things in the meantime." I put down my coffee. $10,000? What kind of things does he need to cover? Bills, expenses. I don't know all the details, Owen. He's my father. He wouldn't ask if he didn't need it. And Brett and Chelsea can't help. They're already helping in other ways. That didn't sit right. Brett and Chelsea helping usually meant Brett pitching another scheme and Chelsea offering spiritual advice and green smoothies. Neither of them had $10,000 lying around. I was certain of that. Nat, we have that money in our house savings. We're trying to pay down the mortgage early. Taking $10,000 out now would. I knew you'd make this difficult. Her tone went sharp, defensive. He's my father, Owen. You have money saved. We're doing fine. This is what family does. Family also doesn't spring 5-figure loan requests over breakfast without any documentation or clear repayment plan. She stared at me like I'd said something unforgivable. Forget it. I'll figure it out myself. She left the table. I sat there, alarm bells going off in my head. This wasn't like Natalie, not the amount, not the defensiveness, not the sudden pressure. Something was very wrong. That night after she'd gone to bed, I did something I'd never done before. I checked our bank accounts thoroughly. We had joint accounts, joint credit cards. I had access to everything, but I'd never felt the need to monitor her spending. We trusted each other. But when I logged in, I found 3 transactions I didn't recognize. $2,000 transferred to an account I'd never seen. $1,500. Sent via peer-to-peer payment app to someone named Richard Morrison, her father. Another $800 to Chelsea's account with the note loan. Over $4,300 sent in the past 2 weeks without a single conversation with me about it. I sat at my desk, staring at the screen, trying to process it. Natalie had been secretly sending money to her family. Not small amounts, thousands of dollars. And if she'd already sent $4,300, what was the $10,000 request about? How much more were they planning to take? I didn't confront her immediately. Years of auditing work had taught me something crucial. Never show your hand until you know the full picture. If you confront someone with partial information, they'll fill in the gaps with lies, and you'll never get to the truth. So I started investigating quietly. I created a separate folder on my laptop and began documenting everything. Screenshots of the transactions, dates, amounts, recipient names. I went back 6 months through our accounts and found more, smaller transactions I'd overlooked. 300 here, 500 there. Over 6 months, Natalie had sent nearly $12,000 to various members of her family. $12,000 I'd never been told about. Next, I pulled up the financial documents I had access to for her parents. When Natalie and I had gotten married, Richard had made a big show of updating his will and estate planning, and he'd shared some of his account information with both of us. Just in case something happens, he'd said. I still had that information saved. Using the credentials he'd given me years ago, I accessed his bank accounts. I expected to find what he'd claimed, evidence of investments, healthy retirement funds, the portfolio he bragged about. What I found instead was a disaster. Richard and Diane had nearly empty checking and savings accounts. Their retirement funds had been almost completely depleted. They had 3 maxed-out credit cards with a combined balance over $60,000. There were regular withdrawals labeled cash with no explanation. 500 here, 1,000 there, multiple times a month, most damning. There were regular transfers going out to 2 accounts I didn't immediately recognize. When I traced the account numbers through public records databases, perfectly legal, by the way, for anyone wondering, I found they belonged to Brett and Chelsea. Richard and Diane had been systematically transferring money to their other 2 children. Not small amounts, thousands per month. And based on the account balances, this had been going on for years. They'd burned through their retirement money feeding cash to Brett's failed businesses and Chelsea's lifestyle. And now they were coming after Natalie, and by extension me, to refill the well. I spent the next week digging deeper. I'm good at my job, and when I focus on a financial investigation, I'm relentless. I requested credit reports on the whole family using information I had access to. I cross-referenced transaction patterns. I tracked down business registrations for Brett's various ventures and found a trail of failed LLCs, dissolved partnerships, and unpaid debts. Chelsea and Marcus were no better. The yoga studio she talked about never actually opened. Marcus's consulting business. No business license, no registered entity, no paper trail at all. They were living on credit cards and handouts from Richard and Diane. The most disturbing discovery came when I found a pattern in the timing of withdrawals from Richard and Diane's accounts. Large cash withdrawals would happen, then within days, Brett or Chelsea would make deposits into their own accounts or pay off chunks of credit card debt. Sometimes the amounts matched exactly. They weren't just getting help from their parents. They were systematically draining them. And here's what made it criminal. I found documents in Richard's email. Account, yes, I still had access from the estate planning years ago, and yes, I was justified in checking. There were emails between Richard, Brett, and Chelsea discussing the Natalie situation. They'd literally strategized about how to get money from my wife. One email from Brett to his father, dated 3 months earlier. Dad, Nat's husband is loaded. He's an audit manager. They own their house. They've got savings. We need to work on Nat to get her on board with helping out the family. Start with small amounts, build up to the bigger ask. Make it about loyalty and family obligation. Chelsea can work the emotional angle. Once we get access to their accounts, we're golden. I read that email 5 times, feeling my anger build with each pass. They'd planned this. They deliberately manipulated my wife, leveraging her love for her parents and her complicated relationship with her siblings to guilt her into funding their lifestyle. And the sign dated 3 weeks ago I mentioned. I found a document in Richard's files, a promissory note supposedly signed by Natalie, promising to provide financial support to the Morrison family trust as needed, in recognition of parental support provided during her formative years. It was backdated 3 weeks and notarized by someone I'd never heard of. Natalie's signature looked legitimate, but the document itself was legally meaningless. You can't create binding financial obligations through vague promissory notes referencing support as needed. But they were planning to use it to pressure her to make her feel legally bound to keep giving them money. I photographed everything, downloaded emails, saved transaction records, built a complete evidence file documenting the entire scheme. Then I called my attorney. James Brennan had handled our house purchase and our estate planning. He was sharp, efficient, and didn't waste time on pleasantries. When I laid out what I'd found, his response was immediate. This is financial. Elder exploitation and fraud. If they're using forged documents to extract money, they're committing crimes. I don't want to press charges against my father-in-law, I said. Not yet anyway. I want to stop this and protect my wife and our assets. Then you need to cut off their access completely and confront them with evidence in a way that makes it clear you're not playing games. Do they know you've discovered this? No one knows, not even Natalie. Keep it that way until you're ready. Document everything, secure your accounts, and prepare for them to retaliate when you cut off the money. I followed his advice precisely. I moved our savings into a new account that only I could access. I set up alerts on all our credit cards. I changed passwords on every financial account and enabled 2-factor authentication. I created a document summarizing everything I'd found, complete with screenshots, transaction records, and copies of the emails. Then I prepared for the confrontation I knew was coming. It came exactly 2 weeks later, though not in the way I expected. Natalie came home from work on a Thursday and said, "My parents want to have dinner with us this weekend. Saturday night at their place. Brett and Chelsea will be there too." "What's the occasion?" I asked carefully. "They want to talk about family finances, get everyone on the same page." There it was, the big ask. They'd been priming Natalie for weeks, sending her guilt-laden messages about family obligation and loyalty, and now they were ready to make their formal demand with the whole family present. "I'll be there," I said. Natalie looked relieved, probably thinking I was finally coming around to being generous with her family. She had no idea what I knew or what I was planning. Saturday arrived. I dressed in a button-down shirt and slacks. I wanted to look professional, not casual. I printed out a summary document of everything I'd found and put it in a manila folder. I also brought a small digital recorder in my pocket, set to voice-activated recording. Legal in Oregon, by the way, one-party consent state. We arrived at Richard and Diane's house at 6. It was a nice place, 3-bedroom ranch in a suburb that had gone upscale in the last decade. I'd always assumed they owned it outright. Now I knew they had a massive mortgage and had refinanced twice to pull out cash. Brett and Chelsea were already there with Marcus. The energy in the room was strange. Forced cheerfulness from Diane, overly casual confidence from Brett, nervous energy from Chelsea. Richard was playing the patriarch, shaking my hand firmly and directing everyone to the dining room. Diane had made a roast. We all sat down to eat, making small talk about work and weather. Natalie was tense beside me, clearly aware something was coming. Brett kept glancing at his father, waiting for some signal. We were halfway through dinner when Richard cleared his throat and launched into his prepared speech. "Owen, Natalie, I want to thank you both for being here tonight. Family is the most important thing in the world, and I'm grateful we can all sit down together like this." He paused for effect, looking around the table. "As you know, Diane and I have worked hard our entire lives to provide for our children. We've sacrificed, saved, invested wisely. But recently we've hit some unexpected challenges." "Here we go," I thought. "Medical expenses," Richard continued, which was a complete lie based on what I'd found. "Some investments haven't performed as we'd hoped. We're in a temporary cash flow situation and we need family to step up." Brett jumped in right on cue. "Dad and Mom have always been there for us. Now it's our turn to be there for them. We're all contributing what we can." Chelsea nodded earnestly. "It's about taking care of each other." Natalie shifted uncomfortably beside me. She'd already given them $12,000 secretly. Now they wanted more, and they wanted it publicly committed. Richard looked directly at me. "Owen, you're a successful guy. You and Natalie are doing well. We're hoping you can help us through this rough patch. We're thinking $50,000 structured as a family loan paid back over time." $50,000. I let the number hang in the air for a moment. Watched everyone's faces. Richard trying to look dignified. Diane looking down at her plate. Brett with that cocky half-smirk like this was already a done deal. Chelsea attempting to project supportive sister energy. Marcus saying nothing, smart enough to stay out of the direct pitch. Natalie started to speak. "Dad, that's a lot of money, we'd need to," but Brett cut her off. "Nat, they're your parents. You can't just abandon them when they need help. What kind of daughter would that make you?" The guilt card played exactly as I'd expected. I set down my fork carefully. "Before we continue this conversation, I think there's some information everyone should see." I reached into my bag and pulled out the manila folder. Set it on the table in front of me. Richard's expression flickered, just for a second, a micro-expression of uncertainty. "What's that?" "Documentation," I said calmly. "Financial records, emails, transaction histories, everything I've found over the past 3 weeks." The room went silent. Brett recovered first, forcing a laugh. "What are you talking about? This is a family dinner, not a business meeting." "You made it a business meeting when you asked for $50,000. I opened the folder and pulled out the first page. A summary sheet I'd prepared. "So let's talk business. Richard, you said you're having temporary cash flow issues due to medical expenses and underperforming investments. That's interesting because according to your bank records, you've had virtually no medical expenses in the past 2 years. And your investments, the ones that still exist, are actually performing fine." Diane's face went pale. I continued, pulling out more pages. "What you do of his 3 maxed-out credit cards with $60,000 in debt. You've depleted your retirement accounts by over $200,000, and you've been making regular transfers, sometimes $5,000–6,000 a month, to Brett and Chelsea." Brett's smirk was gone. "You have no right to access my father's financial information." "Actually, I do. Your father gave me access years ago for estate planning purposes. Never revoked it. Everything I've accessed has been completely legal." I looked at Richard. His confident patriarch act had crumbled. He looked old, suddenly caught. "You've been funding Brett's failed businesses for years," I said, laying out more pages. 7 different LLCs, all dissolved or inactive, combined losses of over $90,000. "And Chelsea," I turned to her, "you and Marcus have been living on credit cards and your parents' money for 5 years. There is no yoga studio. There is no consulting business. You're broke and you've been draining your parents to maintain your lifestyle." Chelsea's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't stop. "And this," I pulled out the printed email, the smoking gun, "is an email from Brett to your father dated 3 months ago discussing how to manipulate Natalie into giving you money. Quote, Start with small amounts, build up to the bigger ask. Make it about loyalty and family obligation." End quote. I slid the email across the table. Natalie picked it up, read it, and her face transformed. Confusion, hurt, realization, anger, all in succession. "You planned this," she said quietly, looking at her brother. "You strategized about how to manipulate me?" Brett started to respond, but I wasn't finished. "There's more." I pulled out the promissory note. "This document, supposedly signed by Natalie 3 weeks ago, committing her to provide ongoing financial support to the family, it's backdated. The notary listed doesn't exist in the state database. This is a forged document, and using it to extort money is fraud." Richard found his voice shaky now. "Owen, you're misunderstanding the situation." "I'm not misunderstanding anything. I'm an audit manager. Finding financial discrepancies and fraud is literally what I do for a living. You've burned through your retirement money subsidizing your adult children's inability to support themselves, and now you're coming after my wife and me to refill your accounts. That's not happening." Diane started crying. Real tears this time, not the manipulative kind. "We just wanted to help our children." "You didn't help them," I said, and my voice was harder now. "You enabled them. You let Brett fail business after business without consequences. You've let Chelsea and Marcus live beyond their means for years. And instead of letting them face reality and learn to support themselves, you've sacrificed your own financial security. And now you want us to do the same." Brett stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loud against the floor. "This is bullshit. You come into our family dinner and attack us with spreadsheets and accusations." "Sit down, Brett." I didn't raise my voice, but something in my tone made him freeze. "You don't get to play the victim here. You wrote the email. You planned the manipulation. You've been living off your parents' retirement for years while pretending to be some kind of entrepreneur. You're not a victim. You're a con artist who ran out of marks." He sat down, face red with fury and humiliation. I looked at Natalie. She was staring at the papers spread across the table, tears running down her face silently. My heart broke for her, but this had to happen. "Nat," I said gently, "over the past 6 months, you've sent your family $12,000 without telling me. I know they made you feel obligated. I know they used your love for them against you. But this stops now." She looked up at me, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought I was helping." "I know, but you weren't. You were just prolonging the inevitable." I turned back to Richard. "Here's what happens next. Natalie and I are cutting off all financial support. No loans, no gifts, no temporary help. You need to figure out your finances without us. I've already moved our savings to accounts you don't have access to. I've set up alerts on all our credit. If anyone in this family attempts to open accounts or take out credit in Natalie's name, I'll know immediately and I'll press charges." "You can't just—" Chelsea started. "I can, and I am. Furthermore, if anyone uses that forged promissory note to claim Natalie owes you money, or if anyone harasses her about this situation, I'm taking this entire evidence file to the police and the state attorney general. Financial elder exploitation, fraud, identity theft. You've committed multiple crimes. I'd prefer not to destroy this family by pressing charges, but I will if I have to." The room was dead silent except for Diane's quiet crying. "Dad," Natalie said, her voice breaking, "why didn't you just tell me the truth? If you needed help, really needed it, I would have tried to figure something out. But you lied. You all lied to me. You used me." Richard had no answer. What could he say? The truth was exactly what I'd laid out. We left shortly after. Natalie didn't say a word to anyone, just stood up and walked out. I gathered my papers, put them back in the folder, and followed her. The drive home was silent for the first 10 minutes. Then Natalie started crying deep, wrenching sobs. I pulled over into a parking lot and just held her while she fell apart. She kept saying, "I'm so sorry," over and over, and I kept telling her it wasn't her fault, that her family had manipulated her, that she didn't need to apologize. When she finally calmed down, she asked, "How long have you known?" 3 weeks, since I found the transactions in our accounts. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed to know the full truth before I said anything, and because I knew you wouldn't want to believe it. I needed proof that was undeniable." She was quiet for a moment. Then, $50,000. They were going to ask us for $50,000 and act like it was our obligation. And if we'd given it to them, there would have been another ask after that, and another, until we were broke too. I feel so stupid. You're not stupid. You loved your family and wanted to believe the best of them. That's not stupid. That's human. We sat in that parking lot for another 20 minutes while Natalie processed everything. Then we went home. The aftermath unfolded over the next several weeks. Brett sent angry texts accusing me of destroying the family, which I ignored. Chelsea tried calling Natalie crying and apologizing, but the apologies always came with caveats. Sorry, but you have to understand we were desperate, or I'm sorry, but Mom and Dad were really struggling. Natalie eventually blocked her number. Richard sent a formal email attempting to explain himself, trying to reframe the situation as miscommunication and family looking out for each other. I responded with a single line. All financial support is permanently discontinued. Do not contact us about money again. Diane tried a different approach. She sent Natalie a handwritten letter, 5 pages talking about how much she loved her, how proud she was of her, how family should support each other through hard times. The letter was emotionally manipulative from start to finish, carefully crafted to pull at Natalie's heartstrings without actually acknowledging the fraud or manipulation. The final paragraph asked if we could reconsider helping them just get back on their feet. Natalie read it, cried, and then, to her credit, threw it away. I love my mother, she told me that night, but loving someone doesn't mean letting them use you. That was a turning point. Over the next month, Natalie started working with a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and financial abuse. She needed help processing the betrayal, the guilt, the complicated feelings about cutting off her family. The therapist helped her understand that what her family had done wasn't just asking for help. It was systematic manipulation designed to exploit her empathy and sense of obligation. Meanwhile, I kept monitoring the situation financially. I tracked Richard and Diane's accounts. Yes, I still had access, and no, I didn't feel guilty about keeping tabs given what they'd tried to pull. They were forced to make real changes. They sold one of their cars. They put the house on the market. They started actually paying down their credit card debt instead of making minimum payments while funding their other children's lifestyles. Brett apparently got a real job, working in sales for an office supply company. Nothing glamorous, but actual employment with a steady paycheck. His social media went quiet. No more posts about building empires or entrepreneur mindset. Chelsea and Marcus moved out of their expensive apartment into something smaller. Chelsea started teaching actual yoga classes at a gym instead of planning a studio that would never exist. Marcus got a job in customer service. They were all living like normal adults for the first time in years because they no longer had access to someone else's money. About 6 weeks after the dinner confrontation, I got a call from James Brennan, my attorney. Owen, I need to give you a heads up. Richard Morrison contacted a lawyer, a guy named Phil DeLuca, practices family law. DeLuca reached out to me asking if your wife would be willing to discuss voluntary family support agreements. I almost laughed. They're still trying. Sounds like it. I told DeLuca that you'd made your position clear and that any further attempts to pressure your wife for money would result in criminal complaints being filed. He backed off pretty quickly, said he'd relay the message to his client. Good. I meant what I said. If they push this, I'll file charges. I know you will. Just wanted you to be aware they made one more attempt. That was the last legal probe we received. Apparently, Richard and Diane finally accepted that the money well had run dry. Family gatherings became non-existent. Natalie and I didn't attend Thanksgiving that year. We spent Christmas with my parents in California instead, and it was actually peaceful. No dramatic financial requests, no guilt trips, just normal family time. Natalie's relationship with her family entered a new phase, distant but not completely severed. She'd text her mother occasionally, brief exchanges about neutral topics. She ignored Brett completely. Chelsea she kept at arm's length, polite but boundaried. I don't hate them, Natalie explained to me one evening about 3 months after everything had happened. I just can't trust them anymore. And I can't have people in my life that I can't trust. That seemed healthy to me, one unexpected consequence. Natalie became much more financially engaged. Before all this, she'd been happy to let me handle most of our money management. But after seeing how financial manipulation had destroyed her family, she wanted to understand our finances completely. We started having monthly budget meetings. She learned about our investments, our retirement planning, our savings goals. She became genuinely interested in financial security because she'd seen firsthand what happened when people didn't take it seriously. I never want to be like them, she told me once, reviewing our investment statements. I never want to be the person who has to beg family for money because I made stupid decisions for years. You won't be, I assured her. You're nothing like them. About 4 months after the confrontation, something interesting happened. Richard's house sold, based on public records. They'd cleared about $60,000 after paying off their mortgage. It wasn't enough to restore their retirement, but it was enough to get them into a smaller place debt-free and give them some breathing room. They moved to a modest condo about an hour away. I found out through Natalie, who heard it through a brief text from her mother. No request for help with moving, no dramatic announcements, just a simple update. A week after they moved, Diane sent Natalie another message. We're settled in the new place. It's small, but it's ours, no mortgage. Your father and I are working on rebuilding. I hope you're doing well. No manipulation, no guilt, no ask for money, just information. Natalie showed me the text. Do you think they've actually changed? I think they've learned that the old approach doesn't work anymore. Whether they've genuinely changed who they are, that takes time to know. She nodded thoughtfully. I'm not ready to see them yet. Then don't. You don't owe them anything, Nat. Not your time, not your forgiveness, not your presence. If you ever want a relationship with them again, it has to be on your terms when you're ready. 6 months after the dinner confrontation, Natalie reached out to her mother for the first time beyond brief texts. They met for coffee, just the two of them, at a neutral location. Natalie set clear boundaries beforehand. 1 hour, no discussions about money, no attempts to guilt her into reconciling with Brett or Chelsea, no emotional manipulation. According to Natalie, it was awkward but civil. Diane apologized, actually apologized, without caveats or excuses. She acknowledged that she and Richard had enabled Brett and Chelsea for years, that they'd been wrong to pressure Natalie for money, that the manipulation had been real and harmful. I don't know if I believe her completely, Natalie told me afterward, but it felt different than before, like maybe she actually understands what they did. Wrong, actions matter more than words, I reminded her. If she's genuinely changed, she'll prove it over time. Diane did prove it slowly. She kept her distance, respected Natalie's boundaries, never brought up money. When they had their occasional coffee meetings, Diane talked about her life, asked about Natalie's work, acted like a normal mother instead of someone working an angle. Richard I only saw once more, about 8 months after the dinner. We ran into him at a grocery store completely by chance in a part of town neither of us normally shopped. He was by himself, looking older and tired, pushing a cart with basic groceries. When he saw us, he froze. Owen, Natalie. Richard, I acknowledged neutrally. Natalie said, Hi, Dad. Awkward silence. Then Richard said, I know I have no right to ask this, but are you both doing okay? We're fine, Natalie said quietly. He nodded. Looked like he wanted to say more, but then just said, Good. That's good. He glanced at me, and for a second I saw something genuine in his expression. Shame, regret maybe. I'm sorry, Owen, for all of it. You were right about everything. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me was still angry at what he'd put Natalie through. Part of me felt something like pity for a man who destroyed his own financial security and damaged his relationships with his children. I hope you're getting things figured out, I finally said. We're trying. He looked at Natalie. I love you, honey. I know I didn't show it the right way, but I do love you. Natalie's eyes were wet. I love you too, Dad, but I can't go back to how things were. I understand. And then we parted ways. It wasn't dramatic or climactic, just a sad, quiet encounter between people who used to be close and weren't anymore. Brett and Chelsea I never heard from directly. According to Natalie's occasional updates from Diane, Brett was still working his sales job, had moved in with a girlfriend, seemed to be actually stable for the first time in his adult life. Chelsea and Marcus had a baby, which apparently shifted their priorities significantly. Suddenly they were focused on daycare costs and diaper expenses instead of maintaining an expensive lifestyle. Natalie sent Chelsea a congratulations message when the baby was born. Chelsea responded with thanks and a photo. Their relationship stayed at that level, distant, polite, but not close. As for Natalie and me, we came out of this stronger. The situation had tested our marriage in ways I hadn't expected, but we'd navigated it together. She'd learned that I would protect her and our family, even if it meant confronting her parents. I'd learned that she was capable of setting boundaries and choosing our partnership over family pressure, once she fully understood what was happening. We paid off our mortgage 2 years early using the money we'd protected from her family's attempts to drain it. We maxed out our retirement contributions. We built an emergency fund that could cover a year of expenses. Financial security became something we actively worked toward together instead of something I managed alone. Natalie's therapy helped her understand patterns she'd grown up with, the way her family had always prioritized Brett and Chelsea's needs over hers. The way she'd been trained to feel guilty for having stability while they struggled. The way family loyalty had been weaponized to extract resources from her. "I think I always knew something was wrong," she told me once about a year after everything had happened. "Growing up, I'd watch my parents bail Brett out of his messes over and over, or give Chelsea money she never paid back. And I'd think, why do I have to be the responsible one who doesn't get help? But then I'd feel guilty for thinking that way, like being responsible should be its own reward. Being responsible is better than being dependent," I said. "But you're right that the dynamic was unfair. They took your stability for granted while rewarding your siblings' chaos. I won't do that if we have kids," she said firmly. "I won't create a dynamic where one child is the giver and the others are the takers. Everyone carries their own weight." We did have kids, eventually. 2 years after the dinner confrontation, our daughter Emma was born, and Natalie was true to her word about the values we'd teach her. Emma's going to grow up understanding boundaries, financial responsibility, and the difference between helping people and being exploited by them. Richard and Diane met Emma once when she was 3 months old. Natalie had decided she wanted them to know their granddaughter, but on strict terms, supervised visits, no time alone with the baby, and absolutely no discussions about money. They agreed, and the visit was fine, awkward, but fine. They held Emma, took photos, acted like normal grandparents. Brett and Chelsea haven't met Emma yet. Natalie's not ready for that, and I support her decision completely. Maybe someday, when Emma's older and can understand complicated family dynamics, we'll consider it. But for now, we're protecting our family from people who haven't proven they can be trusted. The folder of evidence I compiled, transaction records, emails, forged documents, still exists. I keep it in a safe deposit box at our bank, along with our other important documents. I hope I never need it again, but I have it if I do. If anyone from Natalie's family ever tries to claim she owes them money, or if they attempt any kind of financial manipulation again, I have everything documented and ready. So far, I haven't needed it. The threat of criminal charges seems to have been enough to permanently end the schemes. Looking back now, 3 years after that dinner confrontation, I don't regret anything I did. Some people might think I was too harsh, that I should have handled it more gently or given them more chances. But I don't agree. Natalie's family wasn't making honest mistakes. They were running a deliberate, calculated scheme to manipulate her into funding their lifestyle. They'd planned it, strategized it, and executed it with the specific goal of exploiting her empathy and sense of family obligation. That required a decisive, undeniable response. Anything less would have left room for them to try again. The look on Brett's face when I slid that folder across the table, the instant his confident smirk crumbled into panic. That was the moment he realized he'd been caught. Not by some naive mark he could manipulate, but by someone who knew exactly what he was doing and had the evidence to prove it. That moment was necessary. Not for revenge, not for satisfaction, but because it was the only way to definitively end the manipulation and protect my wife and our future. Natalie sometimes asks me how I stayed so calm during the dinner, how I didn't get angry or emotional when I was laying out everything I'd found. Because getting emotional would have given them ammunition, I explain. If I'd yelled or gotten aggressive, they could have made me the villain, claimed I was being controlling or paranoid or attacking the family. By staying calm and just presenting facts, I didn't give them any angle to deflect or reframe. They couldn't argue with bank statements and their own emails. The evidence spoke for itself. "You were scary calm," she admits. "Like you had it all planned out." I did have it all planned out. I knew exactly what I was walking into and how it was going to play out. That's the advantage of doing your homework. Those skills I'd built as an audit manager, following paper trails, documenting discrepancies, presenting findings clearly and objectively, turned out to be exactly what I needed to protect my family from financial predators. Even when those predators were people who were supposed to love us. The dinner confrontation was 3 years ago, but I still think about it sometimes. Not with regret, but as a reminder of an important principle: trust but verify. Love people, help people when they genuinely need it, but don't let anyone, not even family, take advantage of that love to exploit you. And if they try, hit them with evidence so comprehensive and undeniable that they have no choice but to back down. That manila folder saved us from years of financial drain and manipulation. It protected our marriage, our savings, and our future. It forced Natalie's family to confront their behavior and make real changes. Was it harsh? Maybe. Was it necessary? Absolutely. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Today, Natalie and I have the life we worked for, a paid-off house, solid retirement savings, a healthy daughter, and a relationship built on honesty and partnership rather than obligation and guilt. Her parents are rebuilding their lives on their own terms without our money. Brett and Chelsea are learning to support themselves. The family dynamics are still complicated and probably always will be, but they're no longer toxic, and that folder in the safe deposit box, it's still there just in case. Because protecting your family isn't something you do once, it's something you stay prepared to do always. The biggest lesson I learned from all of this: when someone shows you who they are through their financial behavior, believe them. And when family tries to turn love into leverage, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is set a boundary so strong that they can't cross it. That's exactly what I did. And we've been better for it ever since.